Awesome. Gotta figure this out. Image videos. Good enough. Okay. You ready, kids? All right. Okay, guys. Today we're going to be talking about The Jungle, which was a book written by Upton Sinclair. I read this book in about 2 days, so that was extremely fun. This book is kind of a plea for socialism, cleverly disguised as an expose on the meatpacking industry. So I had a really good time reading it. I think it's pretty interesting. And today, for all those who can bear to listen, I kind of want to go through it and share the pain that this book has brought me, because it is one wild ride. So honestly, we're going to buckle up. I have about an hour, so hopefully I can explain the whole book to you. But we'll start from the beginning. If anyone has any questions, go ahead and hit me up in the chat and I'll try and answer it. So basically, we're going to get some context for this book. So Upton Sinclair, he's a socialist, right? He's this middle of the road, like has a rich family, isn't rich himself. But basically, he's contacted by the Socialist Party and they want him to write this book, right? Condemning capitalism. And so he decides to pick perhaps the most egregious abuse of capitalistic power in the Chicago meatpacking industry. So basically, he is writing about a man and his family and their struggles. And basically, the whole point is to expose how evil capitalism is, like greed and, all that is. So basically, if anything seems unrealistic, that's kind of the point. He wants you to be, I don't know, like a little bit skeptical of capitalism. Okay, we're gonna start. So basically our main character, his name is Jurgis, which he's Lithuanian. If that's, a lot of the people in this book are Lithuanian. I think a good half of them. But basically, Jurgis and his family, they moved to America because they hear that there's better wages, better living conditions, like the American dream, right? This stylized, nuclear family, own your house, own your land, all that kind of stuff. So Jurgis and his family, right, they trek to America, and they're they don't speak English, so it's very, basically they get hustled, they get taken advantage of. So like they go and they have to buy food, and like the food's terrible. They have to stay, and basically they're getting double charged for hotels. They buy a house and they got swindled pretty badly. And it's all just all this stuff, like this preamble basically to our main story, where they learn English, they're doing their best, they're basically just trying all this stuff to make it in America. So Jurgis is our provider. Jurgis has a wife, and her name is Ona, I think. And there are like a half dozen other people, but we don't really need to worry about them. Basically, there's Jurgis, Ona. She's extremely relevant. Cousin Marta. We're gonna call her Mary. Okay, so Mary and the old man dad type character, which has a name, but I can't remember. I guess I could read from the book, but So Jurgis basically finds out that to get a job, you literally just stand outside the building, and if you look strong enough, they'll pick you, and you go in and get hired. So basically, he looks at all these people and he says, "What a like these guys are all bums. Okay, like I'm stronger, I'm faster, I'm smarter." So basically, he just stands outside of the meat packing place and gets hired immediately because bro's absolutely jacked. So they take Jurgis in and they, kind of, this is where we get that picture of the meat packing industry where basically, like, if you cut yourself, you die, like blood poisoning. People are, let me see, one of the pictures that they paint, this is what they say. They store the meat in a cellar, right? The rats are all over the meat. So what the men do is they scatter poison all over the place, right, to kill the rats. The rats die, and they shovel the meat and the rats all together to make sausage. And if you saw a rat, you didn't care. You just shoveled it in. So basically, all the meat is rancid. Inspectors, they're supposed to check for tuberculosis. They're supposed to check for tuberculosis. And it's basically like very lax legislation. Nothing is ever checked. The meat is disgusting. People are taking the pigs by their legs and they just go through and the men hack them all off. And it takes like 200 men to butcher one pig. And it is pretty gruesome in the book, which I'll do my best not to describe to you. So they do all this, right? And Jurgis, his job is basically to just cut the pig in half. That's his job. It's his only job. And you just do it, just running back and forth. And at first he likes it because he's like, you got that new worker energy. You're all like, oh man, look at me. I'm just best. But eventually it gets to him. I think it's funny how Jurgis is, he changes a lot throughout the story. He starts getting a little bit suspicious towards the end, but he gets into some crazy stuff. So basically the entire book is them being forced to live in poverty, right? They have no money, people get sick, everybody has to get a job, like literally everyone. So Jurgis, his wife, Mary, the dad is trying to get a job as well, but no one will hire him because he's old. And that's another part of this book. It's like, once you're old and used up, the meat packers they just throw you to the dogs. And they're just like, forget you. So the old man spends like a couple months walking up and down the streets, just trying to find a job. And eventually, he gets hired by like a hiring agent. So basically, it's like a corrupt boss in the industry. He goes up and he says, hey, if you give me 1/3 of your wages, I'll get you a job. So the old man, he can't really refuse, right? So he takes the job. Now, unfortunately, this old man is old. So he does die. But not in the way you'd expect. So I don't know if you know what pickled ham is, but apparently it's like a way you can cook ham. I don't know, I've never had it. It might be good. Right, so they pickle the ham in these massive vats. And the man, he works, he's old, right? And the pickling juices, they start to soak into his shoes, right? And in his hands. And eventually he happens to pass away from that. Just the hard use. Which I think is really sad, and it's kind of sad that people that old have to work. Like in this society, excuse me. In this society that the jungle portrays, it's basically saying like no one has a choice. You all have to work, you all have to grind, always. So sadly, old man dies, the job is just, as soon as he's useless, they throw him to the weeds. Poor. Alright, let's hit up Jurgis. So Jurgis has, let's see what he's been doing. Jurgis is actually nuts, okay? He does his job, right? He gets married to Ona. They spend all this time together. And he just falls into like the worst luck, okay? So he like sprains his ankle. He cuts his hand. He gets blood poisoning. He's set up for months bedridden. And he is just the worst. This is kind of like the first, the start of his troubles, right? So he has one injury. And he is screwed. So at this time, he has a kid, right? Ona and him have a son. And so they have all these extra, financial burdens. It's really hard for them, right? He's laid up, so he loses his job. and he kind of just wastes away while his wife works. And you know what's crazy is his wife gets harassed in an inappropriate way at work, which is crazy. And so Jurgis finds out, and he basically like almost commits a murder. I think that's good enough to say. But anyway, he gets arrested for that, right? And he's just in jail, and his family lose their house, you know, and like his wife ends up dying, you know, they're all homeless, and he's in jail breaking rocks because some guy did something with his wife, you know, it's crazy. And that guy, which his name is Connor, what a dirtbag. Because like, this is another part of the book, is this like idea that capitalism breeds corruption. And so this boss, Connor, right, he has high political friends, and so he's able to leverage his connections to escape punishment. So basically, he can just say, you know, it never happened, you're crazy, and that's it. That's all anyone ever hears. So basically, Jurgis gets out of jail, right? And he tries to find another job, but he's been blacklisted, right? Those same political connections are really damaging for him. So he spends his time, you know, looking for a job. No one will hire him. They promise him jobs, and then they find out his name, and he's gone. So he, at this time, is pretty hopeless. And he does actually end up getting a job. He gets a job in a fertilizer plant where they take the bones of the animals and they turn them into fertilizer. And it's at this time that he starts turning to drinking, right? So Upton Sinclair, his dad, Upton Sinclair is the author, his dad was actually an alcoholic. And I think that's why Jurgis experiences this as well. And it's like, not all these things would happen to one person, but it's kind of like the archetypical, you know, Jurgis is the common man. You're supposed to identify him. So basically, he turns to alcoholism to kind of, you know, seal, basically, I don't know, drink his troubles away, right? And his life goes way downhill pretty fast. So basically, he just abandons his family, which, like, to me is absolutely crazy. Like, he, you know, he's drinking, he comes back, his wife is dead, right? And his family are like, oh my gosh, Jurgis, you know, you gotta tough it out for the children. Like, you work hard, provide for your son. And Jurgis is like, yes, my son, I love him. His son drowns in a puddle in the street. The streets are so bad, it's a hole. And the kid falls in it and freaking dies. In a puddle. This kid is the reason they have signs on buckets. So Jurgis crashes out. Which to me seems reasonable, but also, bro, you still have a family. Like, they are dependents. They need you. And Jurgis is like, he basically says, screw it. You know, if my wife is dead and my son is dead, and that's all that mattered to me, so you know what? I'm just gonna leave. And leave he does. He hobos it. Okay? Bro just hops on a train and goes. And this is, to me, insane thing to do, to just, like, abandon your family. Like, I can be like, oh, you can be sad, you know, your kid died, oh, that's sad, you know, and, like, you can struggle through that, and you can recover, and it's just like, what the, like, he just hops on a train, and he says, you know what, I don't care if I live or die, I'm not working for no man, And so he's going like farm to farm, right? And people are like, oh, bro, you look pretty strong, you know, like, would you want to chop some wood, or would you want to like help with the harvest? And we'll hook you up. We'll get you like a place to sleep, something to eat. And Jurgis is like, no way. He's like, money? I don't need money. I'm homeless. And he just doesn't work. And that was like half the book was him getting a job. Upton Sinclair is nuts because he just says, you know what? You try and get a job in your capitalist little society and it doesn't work out. And look what happens to you. You become a homeless man. So Jurgis eventually makes it to the city, right? Where he does this, like, he describes this act where he's like, oh, I lost my job, I lost my family. So he's basically a professional beggar, right? And Sinclair, he describes how, like, this is like a thing. Like, people go in the streets and they make thousands of dollars just professionally begging, which to me sounds degrading, but I guess, like, you gotta do what you gotta do. I don't know. So Jurgis is on the streets, right? And he's basically a little bit lost, okay? So his morals are definitely on the decline. And while he was in prison, so he got arrested, right, for beating up the guy who sexually harassed his wife. He finds a guy in prison, and his name is Jack Duan. And Jack is this socialite, like, oh, I've been arrested plenty of times. They got me on tax evasion. So he does all of this, right? So Jurgis meets Jack Duan in the city. And he says, Jack, I'm homeless. Isn't this great? And Jack looks at him and is like, oh, brother, you are strong. You need honest work. How about you help me mug people in the streets? And we can steal everything they own. And Jurgis, being the upright family man that he is, he says, yes, Jack, I will help you. I will beat the living daylights out of people in the street with my bare hands. So Jack and Jurgis start this little thing where they find people in bars, they take them outside, and they beat them into unconsciousness, and then they take all their money. Which is not like the best thing. And Jurgis starts reading newspapers about him beating people almost to death. And he likes it? Like, what are you getting at, Sinclair? It just doesn't make sense. So Jurgis is now a profitable mobster, I guess, and he just starts almost killing people. And he says to Jack, Jack, I think being a professional gangster just isn't for me. I'm not about this hood life. I'm an honest, upright, virtuous, hard work. There are a lot of quotation marks here. I hope you can see that. He says, I don't want this job anymore. I don't want to help you. I want to grind poor people. And Jack says, I know just what to do. Politics. So Jurgis, after suffering so much from the hands of political bosses, right? Meat packers who hold vast political power. Okay? Jurgis says, I will become you. I'm going to take your job and become rich. The American dream. It's terrible. So Jurgis joins, he joins the Republicans, the Republican Party. Why not? He joins the Republican Party, and he goes back to Chicago, this time as a political grunt. So where once his family was starving in the streets, He's making $10 a week, which is a vast sum relative to like everyone else's wages, right? He's getting paid so much, and never once does he say, oh, wouldn't it be nice to like see my family? The other half of your family that's still alive, that's still homeless, that's just on the streets. You're in the same town. And he just says, I gotta do what I gotta do. And so he rigs an election. Okay, he rigs an election. He bribes voters. He breaks up a strike against the meat packers by once again beating people into unconsciousness. Okay? Then he takes a job as a meat packing boss, where he grinds people down under his fist. And then he gets into politics. He goes up and he says, I think I've had enough grinding the poor. I've had enough abusing workers. I want to become an even better political grunt. And the man that he's talking to, he says, Jurgis, you've been a good man. I never betrayed a friend. But honestly, you can't just switch your affiliations like that. Okay? I can't just reward this. You gotta stay, my boy. You gotta stay with your job. Don't you know you're getting paid well? And Jurgis says, well, you see, I'd like to discuss that. I'd like to get $12 a week instead of $10. And he's like, excellent, my boy. And that's when you know you could have gone higher. So Jurgis stays. Jurgis stays as a meat packer and a political grunt, small time on the side. And as he's walking on the street one day, drinking his cares away as he's wont to do, who does he see? Connor, the guy who sexually assaulted his wife. So, he beats him almost to death. Reasonable crash out. I can't blame him. Here's the problem. It's still the same guy with the same political connections. Still the same. So he gets arrested again. And he gets put in jail again. 'Cause it's the same guy. Okay, so Jurgis loses his job. He loses $300 in bail money. And he skips town. And he's homeless. Again. So Jurgis says, we're fine. We're chilling. My family, I don't care about them. I'm going to go back to the city and be homeless again. And so he goes back to the city. Now here's the thing. He's broke. He's bar hopping, just trying to find a corner, place to live. And he meets a guy. And this guy happens to be phenomenally wealthy. And also phenomenally drunk. And this guy gives him a $100 bill. Now Jurgis, knowing that he has a $100 bill, the $100 bills, that is like an insane amount of money. That'd be like me giving you $10,000, okay? You have 10 grand in your hand. What are you gonna do with it? You're gonna try and change it. You're gonna try and buy something with it. You're gonna try and put it in a bank. So Jurgis goes to the only respectable establishment he knows, a bar. And he says, can you change a hundo? And the guy's like, sure thing. Gives him the hundo. Takes the hundo. Gives him 99 cents. Jurgis crashes out because he just got robbed. And he gets arrested. Again. My man cannot stay out of prison. They put him in prison. And who does he meet? That same friggin' Jack Dwan. It's the same guy. It's... This guy has been in prison more times than Jurgis has been to church. So eventually, Jurgis spills his guts, right? He says, my life story, very sad, you know. I abandoned my family, and my son died, and my wife died, and I got arrested. And Jack Dawn is like, yes, that's very sad indeed. And eventually, Jurgis gets out of jail, right? And he decides, hey, I'm finally broke. I'm too broke to make it anymore. I'm gonna go back home. So he goes back home. And this man, oh my gosh. He goes to his family, basically, to kind of beg or whatever. And he finds out his sister-in-law, right, Mary, has turned to prostitution to support her family. Because Jurgis is a bum and was living on the streets, hoboing it, when he could have been supporting his family. Okay, sure. So Jurgis gets another job, and his job is, street sweeping, just basically odd jobs, like whatever he can do. Okay, he goes back to his home. The children are like, oh, Jurgis, you're back. And Jurgis is like, what's up? I'm back. Because he sucks bad, he's a terrible person. And Jurgis, he's back in his desperate life. He's out of a job, no longer political grunt, all this. And so he says to himself, I'm just going to wander around until I find something worthwhile. And he walks. And who does he find? But a long-bearded, distinguished man. Preaching the virtues of socialism. And Jurgis, after being a, hardened, staunch criminal, after abandoning his family, after cheating, lying, stealing, doing all manners of wickedness, hears the message of socialism, and it reaches deep into his heart, and that's what pulls him towards feelings. He says, my heart has been touched by socialism. Oh, capitalism, you did me dirty. You're the one who caused me to abandon my 2-year-old son and my dying wife. You're the one who caused me to abuse meatpacking workers and kill them through hard labor. You're the one who... It must have been capitalism that got me arrested 3 times after I tried to murder somebody. And this is the answer? And it kind of makes me think that, Sinclair wasn't paid a whole lot to write this book. Because he doesn't mention socialism but twice before the end of the book. He mentions, there's a random guy who's socialist, and somebody's grandma mentions socialism. And then Jurgis is just like, socialism is the answer to my problems. And everything he does is just like, oh man, it was all worth it. Because I found socialism. And so he gets a job at a hotel with this socialist director. They're portrayed as nice people. No hate against the Socialist Party in the, when was this book published? I don't know, 1920s, 1930s? Yeah, whatever. Okay, it's 18 something. Okay. And, socialism is the answer, It's just if Jurgis had known about socialism before, earlier in life, that would have curbed all his problems, If everyone was a socialist, then Jurgis would have, his wife wouldn't have gotten sexually assaulted. He wouldn't have gone and tried to murder somebody. He wouldn't have been robbing in the streets if he had known about the glories of socialism. And it's just It's crazy. It's crazy. You know. I read this book in 2 days. And I've condensed it into half an hour. You know everything that is meaningful in this book. But that means you don't have to read it, which is excellent. Alright, we're gonna open it up. We're gonna open it up to questions. We have one guy watching this video. It's you. I can see you right now. You can leave a comment or a chat, and I'll try and answer it. Although I really suggest not learning more about this book because it is interesting. It's very informative. It is very indicative of the times. It shows how socialism is portrayed by Upton Sinclair. It is very crucial to the revolutionizing of the meatpacking industry, which honestly there's a lot of history in, and a lot of work has gone into it. A lot of people are involved in improving quality of life. But the book itself is very depressing. So, you know, approach with caution. That's what I'll say to you. But if no one has anything to say, I'm gonna end it right here.